So we will be discussing GS3, one of the important topics, inclusive growth and issues arising from it, as it is explicitly mentioned in the syllabus. So what is basically inclusive growth? So inclusive growth has various components, like we have equal distribution of the resources, then we provide equal opportunities for growth to everyone, then the benefits of the growth must be percolating or penetrating till the lowermost section or the lowermost strata of the society. But to put it in better words, we can say what the UNDP, how the UNDP has defined inclusive growth. So the UNDP defines inclusive growth as a phenomena where every section of society benefits and participates. So inclusive growth has three most important components, which is first is equity, second is empowerment, and third is sustainability. So you can draw this diagram. Inclusive growth, it composes of equity, then it comprises of sustainability, and then empowerment. Now this equity also has two types, two dimension. One is intergenerational and second is intragenerational. So both intragenerational and intergenerational we have to look. Then there was a person known as Thomas Piketty. So basically in economy we have concept of Kuznets curve. So Kuznets curve is this thing. The Kuznets curve says the inequality will rise, and then reach a level from where it will start declining. But what Thomas Piketty says is when the inequalities are rising at this point, somewhere when they are at their peak, there must be interventions. If the interventions are not taken, the inequalities might keep on increasing or moving in the same direction. They won't decrease. So intervention is required, and he denies the theory of invisible hand. So he says invisible hand won't work. So just remember this thing. We will be using this concept multiple times while discussing the inclusive growth. So what is basically the difference between economic growth and inclusive growth? So there are some components if that are added to the economic growth, we would achieve the inclusive growth. So what are these components? So economic growth is basically in the monetary terms. It's more about the concepts like GDP, national income, and all. But what is added to this economic growth to make it inclusive growth is first, as I said, equity, then active intervention by the state, then the growth should have sustainability, then there should be focus on the social sector, then the focus must also be on capacity building where we provide opportunities in health and education field, then there must be human development. So all these things when clubbed with economic growth will take us to an inclusive growth. Now what does our prime minister has to say? So PM Modi says that real growth, you can quote this in your answers in the introductions for any of the answers relating to inclusive growth. So PM Modi says real growth is not possible without inclusiveness. Real growth is not possible without inclusiveness. Now we will see what is the state of inclusive growth in India. So I'll give you some facts, and these facts you can use as per the requirements. If you have to tell the positives, then you can use some of these facts. Like what are the positives? The positives are that India is the fourth largest economy of the world, and as per a report which is the global multi-dimensional index. So it says in the last 10 years, India has been able to move around 170 million people out from poverty in the last 10 years. We also have witnessed improvement in IMR. So the infant mortality rate has basically decreased. We are also the nation which receives one of the highest remittances from UAE, US. So these are basically the positives we can write. But there are some negatives. Basically, there are some facts which you can use wherever you find it suitable. So, though being we are the fourth largest economy, but if we see in terms of per capita income, we are not even in the top 100 countries. We are not even in top 100 countries. Then, if we look at the Human Development Index, we still rank 130. Then, talking about our workforce, so 90% of the workforce of our nation is in the informal sector. So, workforce, informal sector. Then, another fact that states that we have rising inequality is our Gini coefficient. So, our Gini coefficient raised from 0.37 percentage to 0.4 percentage. This, I'm not saying this, but this is given in a report known as price study. You can Google it. Then, if we see the global gender gap index, so India ranks 129th. So there is a disparity, a gender disparity also. Then adding to it is the Indian women. So out of 100, almost 57, that is of the total, 57% Indian women are endemic. This was given in the National Family Health Survey. And also with this survey also mentioned that 23% of women between age 15 to 49, they are undernourished. So these all points can be used wherever we are writing about inclusive growth. Also, what we have to mention, one of the most important, is the Oxfam. The Oxfam report, or the other one report is World Inequality Lab report. So what does these report says? So these report says in India, basically 1% Indians out of the total population, only 1% Indian owns 40% of wealth, and these 1% also owns 22% of income. So you can see how much inequality persists in India. Then there are some more facts. The periodic labor force survey. So basically it says that 14% of our youth is unemployed. So you must be knowing that we are almost we have almost surpassed China in terms of population, and there is a debate about the use of the demographic dividend of India. So this 14% of youth being unemployed is a hurdle in utilizing our demographic dividend efficiently. Then, apart from all these, if we look at the Global Hunger Index of 2024, it says India ranked 105th out of 127 countries. So, this also depicts some poor stats for our topic. Then, now let us see what. So, we have studied some fact, both the positives and the facts which uh, shows that there are inequalities persisting. Now we must see what were the barriers to inclusive growth. So first let me explain you. So the first barrier which we can say that acted as a major hurdle was our policy failures. Now how policy failures? Barriers. So policy failure, so if we trace back to the first 5 year plan, the initial 5 year plan, not specifically the first one, but the initial 5 year plans. So those 5 year plans focused on the trickle down theory, and that backfired and that didn't work. Then in the later 5 year plans, we focused on the basic need approach, that is the roti kapda makan, but it didn't fetch the fruits which we were hoping for. Then uh, we also tried the right based approach. So in that we gave the right to food, right to work, all those types of schemes. But the demerit of this approach was that it required constant funding, and somewhere this also didn't give us the result we were expecting. So this is the policy failures, how they acted as the barriers to inclusive growth. So apart discussing another failures, we must also know that what has been the recent approach, how this policy failure parameter as a barrier to inclusive growth has been solved. So in the recent year, we have uh, almost dismantled the previous approaches and we have adopted a new capability approach. So in capability approach, we focus on providing health and education. If you've read Amartya Sen also, his philosophy and his idea was also the capability approach idea. So working on this, India has various schemes, like we have the stand up scheme, we have the PM Kaushal Vikas Yojana, where the government is promoting and working on the human development. So this is our recent approach, which is far more better than the previous approaches. Then what else were the barriers of the inclusive growth? So the second barrier was and not was, but rather it is now also. It is informalization of economy. अभी थोड़ी देर पहले I told you a fact that 90% of our workforce is in informal sector. So informalization of economy is a barrier. But how? So basically what happens, people who are working in informal sector, they have no security. They have no job security. They have no pension benefits. They have no health benefits. So due to this, we can say that the growth which we get from the informal sector, that is not promoting the inclusive growth. It can provide up to some extent the economic growth, but not the inclusive growth. Then the third and one of the most important barriers to our inclusive growth is that India has a low human capital. Why I am saying this, that India has a low human capital? Because if we compare the level of skill development, so the level of skill development in India and Germany, so in India it is just around 4%, whereas Germany it is around 75%. So there is a huge gap in the skill developments. So this is also acting as a barrier to the inclusive growth. Then obviously we have some governance issues, governance failure. We have corruption, the issue of corruption. Then we also have over regulation. For example, over regulation in the MSME sector. So in further upcoming lectures we will deal with this MSME over regulation thing in detail, but just giving you a brief that there are various government norms and regulation for the MSME sectors which is somehow uh, discouraging the MSME sectors and the entrepreneurs. So the growth of MSME has been affected by these over regulations of the state, and corruption is also a major hurdle. If we look at the corruption perception index of 2024, we'll find that India ranked 96th in the world. Then one of another barrier is that we can include this in policy failure only. That from the agriculture sector we directly jumped onto the service sector, and what we skipped was the development of manufacturing sector, which is now our focus. But if you see successful nations, China and India were almost similar in terms of economy at 1960s and 70s period. But what they did was they strengthened their manufacturing sector. They worked on their manufacturing sector, and you can see what have they achieved. Then moving on to the next one, our social sector spending is less. Social sector spending, and the recent trend shows us that it is on a decline. So you can make a graph like this and somewhere plot the graph like this. So this is starting from 2019. This was the level of our social sector spending. What happened 2020 was pandemic, so there was obviously a peak, but we have witnessed that after 2020, 2022 and 2023 or 2024, the level is decreasing day by day. Currently we are just spending 2.8% of our GDP on the social sector spendings. Then one of the fundamental issues is that we focus more on the revenue expenditure rather than capital expenditure. So more focus on us is on revenue expenditure and less focus is on capital expenditure. This is also one of the barriers to our inclusive growth. Then talking about some societal or social barriers. So patriarchy, discrimination, cultural or historical isolation. These have been also some barriers to our inclusive growth. Then what is the impact of this? So we have seen that these are all the barriers, but what are the impacts? So we can write the impacts in some subheads. We can classify it as environmental impact, economic impact, then we have social impact, then we can also have constitutional impact. So what is the environmental impact? If the growth is not inclusive, remember we talked about three component of inclusive growth which makes economic growth different from inclusive growth. So here we discuss this point of sustainability. So impact is, if the growth is unsustainable, what will it lead to? It will lead to issues of pollution, It will lead to issues of poverty because unsustainable growth always promotes poverty. It will also degrade our resources. Then, what can be the social impacts? So, social impacts could be there can be increasing societal unrest because when people will be free, they won't have work. It can fuel the unrest in the society, it can fuel the poverty related crimes, it can boost the regionalism, it can promote naxalism. Then it will obviously lead to increase in crimes. And one of the social impact is also the increase of reservation and quotas. Then what can be the economic impacts? Obviously there will be a rise in inequality, then rise in poverty, rise in unemployment. Then what can be the constitutional impact? So as our article 38 subclause 2 of the constitution and also article 39 both are part of DPSP, these both will get violated. So this is also one of the impact of non-inclusive growth. Now we have seen the barriers, we have seen what is inclusive growth, we have also seen what is the impact. Now what can be the solution? So one of the solutions you can quote as the solution given by the Niti Aayog. So Niti Aayog in the Niti Aayog India at the rate 75 report, it gives a four-front strategy. Now what is this four-front strategy? So first it says it's we must target a economic growth which is close to 8% for the next 20 years. So our growth, economic growth should be around 8% for next 20 years. Then we must increase infrastructure spendings, investment in infrastructure. Then we need to improve the governance, and then there should be social inclusion while policy making. Now one very important aspect of this governance improvement is reforms at bureaucratic level. What is needed at bureaucratic level? Two things which are most important at the level of bureaucracy is empathy and compassion. Empathy and compassion while policy formulation. So following these four front strategy, we saw that our budget of 2025 had some of the components, like we had focused on the manufacturing sector, skilling, inclusion of science and tech. We also are focusing on the agriculture production. The budget also emphasized on the energy sector. So in all fields such as agriculture, education, health and social welfare, in all these four you can always mention some of the government schemes for which promotes inclusive growth. For example, in agriculture we have Viksit Krishi Sankalp Abhiyan, we have PM Fasal Bima Yojana. For education we have Nipun Bharat, we have Khelo India centers. Then for health we have Ayushman Bharat, we have Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana PMJ. Then we have Indradhanush Mission. For social welfare we have Prime Minister Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana. Then we have the e-Shram portal. So these are some of the schemes which the government is operating for the promotion of inclusive growth. Apart from this, if we have to write a mains answer on this topic, we can add some points about what more is needed. What more? So what more may first is tax reforms. What do I mean by tax reforms? By tax reforms I mean there should be a progressive taxation policy. So basically, today if you go to market and buy a biscuit of rupees 5, so the cost has some tax, suppose 0.75 paisa. Now if you and I will go and purchase this biscuit, we are paying 0.75 paisa to government. And supposing we are from middle class, now suppose Mr. Ambani or Mr. Adani, they go and buy the same packet of biscuit, they'll also be giving only 0.75 paisa to the government. So this is somewhere regressive taxation, as a tax is not increasing for the upper economic class. So one reform could be progressive taxation. So that means as the income and as the net worth increases, the tax should be different. For poor it should be different, and for the very wealthier person it should be different. Then what else could be done is inclusion of science and tech, skill development, empowerment of empowering or the empowerment of marginalized. Then investment in social infrastructure must be increased. And at the end, in conclusion, we can write a very famous quote of Pradhan Mantri Modi ji. That is, he says, Viksit Bharat can be achieved. Viksit Bharat can be achieved only by inclusivity. This can be the introduction as well as the conclusion for any of the answers on this topic. So this is what our PM has to say. So this was all for the topic of inclusive growth. You can add more if you find some interesting thing in the newspaper, maybe some example or case studies.